Brothers and sisters, some of us are walking into a brand new season, but dragging an old suitcase. God has called you into freedom, but you're still chained to what He told you to let go of. You've been praying for new blessings, but your hands are too full of yesterday's baggage to receive tomorrow's promise. The question isn't whether God is able to deliver you. The question is, why are you still carrying what He told you to drop? Today, we're going to talk about how to release it, how to trust Him enough to put it down, and how to step into the destiny that's been waiting on you all along. Obedience is not just a church word, it's the very bridge between where you are and where God has called you to be. Too many of us are waiting for God to open the next door, but God is waiting for us to walk through the one He already unlocked. We're praying for deliverance, asking for direction, pleading for breakthrough. But the truth is, we already know what He told us to do. We just haven't done it. Sometimes it's not that the blessing is delayed. It's that our obedience is. When God gives an instruction, it's not a suggestion. It's a divine command, and with that command comes His supernatural wisdom. He sees the danger you can't see. He knows the trap the enemy has set ahead of you. He understands the weight you're carrying and how it will hold you back from running the race He has prepared for you. But instead of trusting His vision, we cling to our own. We hold on to people, habits, and mindsets that He told us to drop, thinking we can somehow carry them into the next season. What we don't realize is that partial obedience is still disobedience. Think about the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness. God had already promised them the land, already laid out the inheritance, already fought battles on their behalf. But their inability to fully trust His word, their grumbling, their fear, their reluctance to step into the unknown, kept them circling the same desert for 40 years. That's the danger of holding on to what God told you to leave behind. You may not lose your salvation, but you can absolutely delay your destiny. Obedience is the doorway to freedom because it requires surrender. You can't be obedient and still in control. The very act of obedience says, Lord, I don't understand it all, but I trust You more than I trust myself. And that trust is what breaks chains. That trust is what opens prison doors. That trust is what allows you to step into spaces you could never have reached in your own strength. When God told Abraham to leave his father's house and go to a land he had never seen, Abraham didn't have a map. He didn't have all the answers. All he had was a word, and that was enough. The Bible says, Abraham obeyed and went, and it was that obedience that positioned him to become the father of many nations. If Abraham had hesitated, had reasoned with himself, had said, Lord, let me just finish some things here first, he would have missed the appointed moment. Some blessings have an expiration date. Delayed obedience can cause you to miss the divine timing that God has set in motion. Obedience also frees you from the weight of unnecessary battles. Some of the fights you're in right now are not because the enemy is attacking you. They're because you're still holding on to what God told you to release. You're still connected to people He cut off. You're still investing time in places He's already pulled you out of. You're still entertaining conversations he's already silenced. And because of that, you're draining strength on things that were never yours to carry in the first place. When you obey, you step under the covering of God's protection. You align yourself with His provision. You place yourself in position for His favor to find you. The opposite is also true. Disobedience exposes you. Jonah found that out when God told him to go to Nineveh, and he went in the opposite direction. He found himself in a storm that wasn't necessary, trapped in the belly of a fish, because he thought his way made more sense than God's way. How many of us are sitting in the belly of our own storms right now simply because we refuse to obey? Obedience doesn't mean it will be easy. In fact, many times it will cost you something: relationships, comfort, reputation, plans you made for yourself. But it will never cost you more than disobedience will. Disobedience costs peace. It costs time. It costs opportunity. And in some cases, it costs destiny. God's instructions are not meant to restrict you. They are meant to release you. The enemy will try to make you believe that if you let go of what you're holding, you'll be empty. But in reality, God can't fill what's already full. Obedience empties your hands so God can put something greater in them. That's why it's the doorway to freedom. Because every act of obedience breaks the grip of fear, loosens the hold of pride, and shatters the chains of the past. If you find yourself stuck, frustrated, or feeling like you've been circling the same mountain, ask yourself, did I do the last thing God told me to do? Because sometimes the key to moving forward is not a new word from God, but a return to the last word you ignored. It's going back and finishing what He already asked you to start. I know it's hard to obey when you can't see the outcome. I know it's uncomfortable to step out when you don't know where your foot will land. But that's the essence of faith. Trusting the God you can't see in order to reach the promise you can't touch yet. And here's the truth: every time you choose obedience, you are declaring that you believe God is who He says He is, and that He will do what He says He will do. If you want freedom from the cycles that have been holding you back, it's not just about praying harder or shouting louder. It's about aligning your actions with what God has already spoken. Because when you obey, you give God permission to take you places you could never go in your own strength. You open the door for His supernatural intervention. You step out of bondage and into liberty. Obedience is not always glamorous. It often happens in the quiet, unseen moments where you choose God's way over your way. But make no mistake, those hidden acts of obedience will bear public fruit. They will produce blessings that overflow into every area of your life. And when you look back, you'll realize that the freedom you've been praying for didn't come from God suddenly moving. It came from you finally moving in step with Him. So if you want to walk in freedom, stop waiting for the chains to magically fall off. Listen for His voice. Do what He says. Drop what He told you to drop. And watch as the doorway to your destiny swings wide open. Imagine standing in front of God, asking Him to bless you, asking Him to pour out His favor, asking Him to enlarge your territory. But your hands are already full. You're carrying yesterday's pain, Last season's habits, old relationships, unresolved offenses, and the clutter of your own plans. God is trying to hand you something new, but there's no space to receive it. That's what happens when your hands are full. You're asking for abundance, but you're still gripping scarcity. You're praying for the future, but you're still clinging to the past. This is the tension that many of us live in. We want God to pour out more, but we won't release what we already have. We think we can manage both, the old and the new, but God's blessings often require empty hands and an open heart. You can't grab hold of the promise if you're still holding on to the problem. It's like trying to carry groceries while holding onto an umbrella, a briefcase, your phone, and a bag of old trash you meant to throw out last week. You might think you're managing it, but eventually something has to fall. God doesn't want you fumbling the blessings He's trying to give you. He wants you prepared to carry them, to steward them well. That preparation begins with letting go. There's a reason why farmers clear the land before planting seeds. They remove rocks, pull out weeds, and make room for growth. You can't plant a harvest on cluttered soil. In the same way, you can't expect God to plant fresh dreams in a heart already overgrown with old ones. When your hands and your heart are full, there's no room for God to do something new. Some of us are full of unforgiveness. We want God to send peace into our lives, but peace cannot settle where bitterness resides. Others are full of control. We say we trust God, but we keep holding on to every decision, every outcome, every timeline. And then there are those who are full of old victories. Yes, even good things can take up too much space. If you're still living off of what God did 10 years ago, you may be missing what He's trying to do right now. When Jesus called the disciples, they left their nets. They didn't try to drag the fishing boat into ministry. They didn't try to hold the net in one hand and the mission in the other. They dropped what they had so they could receive what He was offering, and what He gave them was far greater. They went from catching fish to catching men, from temporary income to eternal impact. That's what happens when you make room for God. Sometimes, what fills your hands isn't even bad. It's just not meant for the season you're stepping into. David was a shepherd before he was a king, but he didn't carry sheep into the palace. The sling was useful in one season, but the crown required a different posture. If David had tried to hold on to the sling while wearing the crown, he would have looked foolish. There are some tools, habits, and relationships that worked in your past, but have no place in your future. We also have to recognize that full hands aren't always a sign of blessing. Sometimes they're a sign of burden. Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're fruitful. Carrying a lot doesn't mean you're carrying the right things. The enemy is fine with you being overloaded as long as you're not available for God's assignments. That's why he tempts you to keep holding on to things you should have released. Because if your hands are full of distractions, you can't take hold of your destiny. Think about Ruth. She had to leave Moab, a place of loss and limitation, in order to step into the fields of Boaz, where her future was waiting. If she had insisted on holding on to Moab, she would have missed Bethlehem. Full hands keep you tied to the wrong places and wrong people. Empty hands allow God to guide you to the right ones. There's a humility in letting go. It's an admission that what you have now is not enough for where you're going. That's hard for our pride to accept because we want to believe we can manage everything, carry everything, keep everything. But the kingdom of God doesn't operate on hoarding. It operates on exchange. You release what you have so God can give you what you need. When your hands are full, you might think you're protecting what's yours, but in reality, you're preventing what's next. The rich young ruler learned this the hard way. Jesus told him to sell what he had, give to the poor, and follow him. But his hands were too full of wealth and possessions to take hold of eternal treasure. He walked away sorrowful, not because Jesus rejected him, but because he refused to make room. And here's the thing, emptying your hands can feel like loss at first. You might feel exposed, vulnerable, uncertain, but it's in that space of emptiness that God can pour in his abundance. It's in that surrender that you finally discover you were never meant to carry so much weight on your own. The truth is, some of us are praying for new jobs, but our hands are full of resentment toward the old one. Some of us are asking for healthy relationships, but our hearts are full of wounds from the last one. Some of us are seeking a deeper walk with God, but our lives are so full of distractions that there's no time left for him. The prayer isn't just, Lord, bless me. It's, Lord, make room in me for your blessing. So here's the challenge. Take inventory of what you're carrying. Ask yourself, if God gave me the very thing I've been praying for right now, could I even hold it? If the answer is no, then it's time to drop something. It might be a habit. It might be a mindset. It might even be a good thing that's just no longer the right thing. But whatever it is, you can't step into overflow with hands already at capacity. When you finally release, you'll discover that God never meant for you to lose. He meant for you to gain. And sometimes, the only thing standing between you and that gain is the grip you have on what needs to go. Full hands can't receive, but empty hands, they're ready for anything heaven has to offer. Carrying weight from the past is like running a marathon with a backpack full of bricks. You might still be moving, but you're not moving the way you could. The extra weight slows you down, wears you out, and eventually robs you of the strength to finish the race. That's what happens when you keep holding on to past pain, past failures, past disappointments, or even past seasons of success. They become unnecessary baggage, and that baggage will always prevent progress in the present. The danger is that past weight often feels familiar, and familiarity can be deceptive. Just because something feels comfortable doesn't mean it's beneficial. Some of us have been carrying certain hurts for so long that we've built our identity around them. We say, this is just who I am. This is my story. But you can't move forward if your story is stuck on the same chapter. God wants to write something new in your life, but he can't turn the page if you refuse to let go of the one you're on. Past weight comes in many forms. For some, it's the sting of betrayal. Someone hurt you deeply, And even though years have passed, you still replay the moment in your mind. You carry it like a badge, but it's really a chain. For others, it's regret, the what ifs and if onlys that echo in your head. You think about opportunities you missed, mistakes you made, words you wish you could take back. That regret becomes a heavy burden that keeps you from seeing the opportunities right in front of you now. And then there's the weight of shame. Shame convinces you that because of what you did, you can never be more than where you are. It whispers that your past defines you, that your mistakes disqualify you from God's promises. But that is a lie. The same God who forgave Peter after he denied Jesus 3 times is the same God who can restore you. The problem isn't whether God can forgive you. It's whether you can forgive yourself enough to put the weight down and move forward. Even past victories can become a hindrance if you cling to them too tightly. It's good to celebrate what God has done, but if you live there too long, you'll start measuring today's potential against yesterday's miracles. That's why Paul said, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. He understood that both pain and glory from the past can slow you down if you let them. Yesterday's win can make you complacent, and yesterday's loss can make you hesitant. Either way, you get stuck. The Israelites faced this issue when they left Egypt. Physically, they were free, but mentally, they were still in bondage. They carried the weight of their slavery in their minds, complaining whenever things got difficult, and even longing to return to Egypt because it was familiar. They couldn't embrace the promise of the promised land because their hearts were still tethered to the past. How many of us are free in body, but bound in spirit because we're still carrying Egypt with us? Past weight doesn't just slow your progress. It drains your energy for the battles ahead. Life is a journey filled with hills to climb and valleys to cross. If you're already weighed down, even small challenges will feel overwhelming. Some of you are exhausted, not because God has given you too much to carry, but because you've added baggage He never asked you to bring. He gave you daily bread, but you've been hoarding yesterday's manna, and now it's spoiling in your hands. To move forward, you have to make a conscious decision to release what's behind you. That's not denial, that's discipline. Releasing the past doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means acknowledging it, learning from it, and then refusing to let it control your next steps. Just like a runner sheds excess gear before a race, you have to strip off the things that hinder you if you want to run the race God has set before you. One of the hardest parts about releasing past weight is that it often involves forgiveness. Forgiving others for what they did, forgiving yourself for what you allowed, and sometimes even forgiving life for not turning out the way you expected. Forgiveness doesn't mean the wrong was right. It means you're no longer letting it ride on your back while you're trying to move forward. It's setting yourself free. You also have to watch out for the voices that keep trying to hand you back the weight you've already dropped. There will always be people who remind you of who you used to be, who bring up old mistakes, who try to chain you to your past because they're uncomfortable with your growth. You can't control what they say, but you can control whether you pick up what they're offering. Sometimes, progress means learning to smile, nod, and keep walking with your hands empty. Dropping the weight of the past requires trust. Trust that God's future for you is better than the history you've been holding on to. It means believing that His promise of a hope and a future is more powerful than your memories of failure and pain. That trust is what allows you to walk into the unknown without fear, knowing that every step forward is taking you further away from the weight that once held you back. Picture a hot air balloon. It has the capacity to rise, but it can't ascend until the sandbags are cut loose. Your life is that balloon. The Spirit of God is the flame that gives you lift. But if you don't cut the ropes to the weight of the past, you'll stay grounded, full of potential but going nowhere. The higher God wants to take you, the more weight you'll have to release. So today, take inventory of what you're carrying. Identify which things are from God and which are just leftover baggage from the past. Be honest with yourself. Are you holding on to it because you need it, or because you're afraid of who you'll be without it? Sometimes, the very thing you think is holding you together is actually what's keeping you from moving forward. The truth is, progress doesn't happen by accident. It's intentional. You can't stumble into freedom while dragging chains from the past. You have to choose to put them down. You have to decide that your future matters more than your familiarity. And once you do, you'll discover that the race ahead feels lighter, your steps feel quicker, and your heart feels freer. God is not calling you to run your next lap with last lap's weight. He's inviting you to lay it down, leave it behind, and step fully into what He has prepared. Because the moment you drop the past, you make room for the present. And you open the way for the future He's been holding for you all along. Trusting God's wisdom over your comfort is one of the hardest yet most essential parts of walking in faith. By nature, we gravitate toward what feels familiar, safe, and predictable. Comfort zones aren't just physical spaces. They're mindsets, habits, and relationships we've settled into because they require little risk. But the thing about comfort zones is that they're also growth-free zones. You cannot experience the fullness of God's plan for your life if you insist on staying where you feel most at ease. God's wisdom rarely aligns with human comfort. In fact, the call of God almost always pulls you into a place that stretches you beyond what you think you can handle. Think about Noah. Building an ark on dry land made no sense. It wasn't comfortable to look foolish in front of his neighbors, but he trusted God's wisdom over his own understanding. And that obedience saved his family and preserved the future of humanity. Comfort would have said, "That's too much work for nothing." Wisdom said, "Prepare for the rain you can't yet see." The reason we often resist God's instructions is because they disrupt our routine. Comfort likes things to stay the same. Wisdom sees what needs to change. Comfort wants control. Wisdom requires surrender. Comfort asks, "What will this cost me?" Wisdom asks, "What will it cost me if I don't?" And the truth is, staying in comfort has a cost. It costs you growth, opportunity, and the chance to walk in the greater things God has for you. When God told Abram to leave his father's house and go to a land he would show him, he didn't give him a GPS location or a travel itinerary. That's the way God works. He often gives direction without all the details. If Abram had waited until he had all the information, he would still be waiting. Comfort craves certainty. But trust says, I don't need to know everything as long as I know the one who does. The tension between comfort and wisdom shows up in the little things. 2, God might tell you to end a relationship that's been in your life for years, even though the thought of letting go feels painful. He might lead you to step into a ministry role, a new career, or a place of service that terrifies you because it's unfamiliar. He might urge you to forgive someone who wronged you, even though holding the grudge feels safer than risking vulnerability again. Every time, the choice will be the same: cling to comfort or trust His wisdom. What makes God's wisdom so trustworthy is that it's not bound by the limits of our vision. We can only see a small piece of the puzzle, but He sees the whole picture. That's why Proverbs tells us to lean not on your own understanding. Our understanding is shaped by what we've experienced, but God's wisdom is rooted in His eternal perspective. He knows where the road leads, what dangers are ahead, and what blessings are waiting, and He tailors His instructions to get us there safely. Sometimes we mistake comfort for peace, but they're not the same thing. Comfort is an absence of challenge. Peace is the presence of God, even in the challenge. You can be completely out of your comfort zone and still walk in perfect peace if you know you're exactly where God wants you to be. In fact, some of the most peaceful seasons of your life may come while you're standing in the middle of the unknown, because you've learned to rest in the wisdom of the one who called you there. Look at Peter stepping out of the boat to walk on water. Staying in the boat was comfortable. It was familiar. But the miracle didn't happen in the boat. It happened on the water. As long as Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, he was fine. It was only when he focused on the wind and waves that fear pulled him down. That's the risk of choosing comfort over wisdom. You end up missing the miraculous because you're too focused on the conditions instead of the caller. Choosing God's wisdom will often require sacrifice. You may have to give up conveniences, lay down your own plans, or let go of the timeline you had in mind. But what you gain in return, His guidance, His provision, His protection, far outweighs what you give up. Comfort will give you temporary ease, but wisdom will give you lasting fruit. We see this in the life of Jesus. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." In that moment, comfort would have been avoiding the cross. Wisdom saw the redemption on the other side of it. If even Jesus, in His humanity, had to wrestle between comfort and God's will, we shouldn't be surprised when we face the same struggle. But like Him, we must choose the Father's wisdom, knowing that the temporary discomfort will lead to eternal impact. One of the lies the enemy tells us is that God's way will make us miserable, that stepping out of our comfort zone means losing joy, security, or fulfillment. But the truth is the opposite. Staying in a stagnant, safe place will quietly drain the life out of you. The most alive you will ever feel is when you're walking in obedience to God, even if it's uncomfortable, because you'll know you're right where you're supposed to be. You might be thinking, but what if I step out and fail? Here's the beauty of trusting God's wisdom. Even when things don't go the way you expect, He knows how to use every step for your good. Comfort seeks to avoid all risk. Wisdom teaches you that even setbacks are part of the process. That's why Paul could say, all things work together for good. Because when you trust the one directing your steps, you can rest knowing He'll get you where you need to go, even if the path looks different than you planned. There will come moments when God asks you to move without explanation, give without guarantee, speak without certainty of how it will be received. Those are the moments that define your faith. They're not tests to break you. They're opportunities to build you. Every time you choose wisdom over comfort, your capacity for trust grows. And as your trust grows, so does your ability to carry what God wants to give you in the future. So if you find yourself at a crossroads between what feels safe and what God is saying, remember this: comfort will keep you where you are, but wisdom will take you where you're meant to be. God's wisdom doesn't just lead you out of your comfort zone. It leads you into your calling. And when you finally step out, you'll realize that the discomfort was temporary, but the fruit of obedience is eternal. Release is the first step toward restoration, because nothing broken can be repaired while you're still clinging to it in its current form. Many of us are asking God to heal what we refuse to hand over. We're praying for Him to fix our hearts, restore our relationships, rebuild our lives. But we're still gripping the very pieces He's asking us to surrender. You can't hold on and let go at the same time. Restoration starts with an act of trust, a willingness to put it in His hands and take yours off of it. There's something in our nature that resists letting go. We tell ourselves, if I just hold on to it a little longer, maybe I can fix it myself. We think that our grip will protect it, when in reality, our grip often prevents the healing. When you're holding something too tightly, you're not giving God room to work. And here's the truth. The longer you hold on to broken pieces, the more they cut you. The wound stays fresh because you keep pressing it against your skin. Releasing is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of faith. It's saying, God, I believe you are more capable of handling this than I am. And that faith is what opens the door for Him to begin the restoration process. As long as you're holding on to it, you're in control. And as long as you're in control, God won't force His way in. Release is your invitation for Him to take over. Think about the widow in 1 Kings 17. She had just a handful of flour and a little oil left, enough to make one last meal before she and her son died. Holding on to it would have been the logical choice. But Elijah told her to release it, to make a meal for him first. It didn't make sense in the natural, but she obeyed. And that act of release unlocked supernatural provision. The flour and oil never ran out. She didn't just survive, she stepped into abundance. That's the power of release. Releasing also means loosening your hold on the way you thought things should be. Sometimes we're not just holding on to people or possessions. We're holding on to our own expectations. We had a vision for how life was supposed to turn out, and when it didn't, we clutched that vision like a security blanket. But restoration doesn't mean God gives you back the exact thing you lost. It means He gives you something even better, even if it looks completely different than you imagined. In John 11, Mary and Martha had to release their hope that Jesus would heal Lazarus before he died. They wanted restoration on their timeline, but Jesus had a greater plan: resurrection. They had to let go of their idea of how the miracle should happen before they could see the miracle He had in mind. That's why releasing is so critical. It clears the space for God's way, which is always higher than ours. Some of us are holding on to past wounds because we're afraid that if we let go, we'll lose part of our identity. We've been the hurt one for so long that we don't know who we'd be without that pain. But God is not trying to take away who you are. He's trying to restore who you really are beneath the layers of hurt. And the only way He can do that is if you place that pain in His hands. Release doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying. There's a difference. You can still love someone while releasing them to God. You can still value a dream while releasing it into His timing. You can still acknowledge your past without letting it dictate your present. Release shifts the weight from your shoulders to His, and His shoulders are more than strong enough to bear it. The enemy will try to convince you that release equals loss. But in God's kingdom, release equals freedom. It's like the seed Jesus talked about in John 12. Unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. That seed has to be released from your hand, buried in the soil, and surrendered to the process before it can bring forth life. What feels like burying is often just planting. The truth is, holding on can delay your healing. It's like having a broken bone and refusing to let the doctor set it because you're afraid of the temporary pain. But until you release it to His touch, it will never heal properly. And when you finally let go, you'll find that His restoration is not just about returning you to where you were before the break. It's about making you stronger than you were before it happened. Look at Job. He lost almost everything, and yet he released his right to curse God and walk away. He held on to his faith instead of his bitterness. And in the end, God restored him with double what he had before. The restoration was greater than the loss, but it began with his decision to release what he couldn't control and trust God's wisdom in the midst of his suffering. Releasing can be scary because it feels like a free fall. But what you discover when you take your hands off is that you're not falling. You're being caught. God has never let go of you, even when you've been afraid to let go of what's been hurting you. And every time you release something into His hands, you make room for Him to place something greater into yours. So ask yourself, what am I still gripping that God told me to drop? Is it an offense I've been nursing? A relationship I've been trying to fix? A plan I've been forcing to work? Whatever it is, know this. Restoration is waiting on the other side of your release. God can't fill what's already full. He can't heal what you won't uncover. And He can't restore what you refuse to let go of. The first step toward restoration is always the same: open your hands. Let the pieces fall into His care. Trust that He knows how to put them back together in a way that is stronger, more beautiful, and more complete than you could ever manage on your own. And once you take that step, you'll look back and realize that what you released was never really your loss. It was the doorway to everything God had been waiting to give you all along. We've walked through some hard truths together. That obedience is the doorway to freedom. That you can't receive with full hands. That past weight will keep you from present progress. That God's wisdom will stretch you beyond your comfort. And that release is the first step toward restoration. But all of these truths come back to one central question. Why are you still carrying what God told you to drop? This isn't just about letting go of things that are obviously destructive. Sometimes it's about releasing what feels good, but isn't God. It's about loosening your grip on the familiar so you can take hold of the future. It's about trusting that the same God who called you to drop it is the same God who has something better waiting on the other side. If you keep carrying it, it will cost you. It will cost you peace. It will cost you time. It will cost you opportunities that were designed for the lighter, freer version of you. You can pray, shout, and declare all you want, but as long as your hands are wrapped around what He told you to release, you'll be too full for what He's trying to give you. God is not trying to punish you by asking you to let go. He's trying to position you. He's not stripping you. He's making room for you. And the moment you decide to obey, the moment you drop what He told you to drop, you'll find that your steps get lighter, your vision gets clearer, and your spirit gets freer. So I'm asking you, not just as a preacher, but as someone who's had to walk this out myself, will you finally let it go? Will you trust Him enough to drop it, even if it's been part of your identity? Will you believe that what's ahead is greater than what's behind? Today is your moment. Don't carry it into another season. Don't take it another step. Lay it down at His feet and watch Him do what only He can do. Restore, renew, and release you into the destiny that's been waiting for you all along. Because the truth is simple. You'll never step into the fullness of God's promise while your hands are holding on to yesterday's baggage. The blessing is already prepared. The door is already open. The only thing left is for you to drop the weight and walk through.